The year is 1959. A humble Capuchin friar sits in his cell in San Giovanni Rotondo. His hands are wrapped in linen bandages, and bloodstains are faintly visible upon the white cloth. He is writing a letter that he was reportedly commanded to write by Jesus himself. It is a letter that, according to legend, contains a date and a warning that has been whispered about for decades, but is only now becoming terrifyingly relevant. That year is 2025. They call it the Great Separation. Others call it the 3 Days of Darkness. Across the internet, millions are asking the same question. Did the most famous mystic of the 20th century predict the end of the era we are living in? We know he could see the human soul, and we know he bore the wounds of Christ. We know he predicted the rise of popes and the fall of nations. But did he see us? Did he see the catastrophes looming on our horizon? Tonight we peel back the layers of internet rumors and forged letters to separate the myths from the man and find the truth. The truth is far more disturbing than any internet conspiracy. To understand the prophecy, you must understand the prophet, because Francesco Forgiani was not a normal man. From the time he was 5 years old, he did not just pray. He conversed. He spoke with Jesus and the Virgin Mary and his guardian angel as casually as you would speak to a neighbor. But with the light came the darkness. The devil, whom Pio mockingly called Bluebeard, would assault him physically. Monks in neighboring cells would hear the sounds of crashing furniture and chains and screams echoing through the stone corridors of the monastery. But the world did not care about a monk fighting demons in a remote Italian village. Not until September 20th in the year 1918. He was praying in the choir loft when he suddenly saw a mysterious figure with hands dripping with blood. When the vision ended, Pio looked down at his own hands. He had been pierced. These were the stigmata, or the wounds of Christ. For the next 50 years, these wounds would never heal. They would never become infected. They would bleed fresh, arterial blood day after day, smelling not of rot, but of roses and perfume. Science could not explain it. Skeptics from the Vatican came to expose him as a fraud, and they used carbolic acid and sealed his hands in gloves, but the wounds remained. Why does this matter to us in 2025? Because a man who lives outside the laws of physics likely lives outside the laws of time. If he could see the wounds of the past, could he see the catastrophes of the future? Let us address the elephant in the room. If you search for Padre Pio prophecies, right now you will be bombarded with a specific and terrifying narrative. The rumor states that in a letter to his superior in 1959, Pio listed 12 terrifying events. He speaks of meteorites and of war, and most famously the 3 Days of Darkness. This is described as a period of 72 hours where the sun will not rise. The air will be filled with pestilence, and demons will mimic the voices of your loved ones to lure you outside. The prophecy claims that man has abandoned the right path, and the judgment will be sudden. Many claim the timeline aligns with 2025. They point to the current geopolitical tension and the wars in the East and the moral decay. They say Pio saw it all, but here is where we must be careful. Is this letter real? Or is it a forgery designed to sell fear? To find the answer, we have to look at what Padre Pio actually wrote, and not just what the internet says he wrote. What we find in the legitimate archives is actually more specific, and perhaps more chilling than the rumors. He did not just predict darkness. He predicted a crisis of faith. He saw a time when the church itself would seem empty and the world would celebrate its own destruction. We are going to explore the difference between the fake viral prophecies and the verified warnings he gave to the world, because the real danger might not be a falling meteor, but something happening inside the human heart. To understand why millions of people are panicking about the 2025 prophecies, we first have to understand why anyone listens to this friar in the first place. It is not because he was a holy man. It is because he was a dangerous man. He was dangerous to our understanding of reality. While the internet obsesses over the unverified letter of 1959, there are military records and eyewitness testimonies that document things that simply should not be possible. If we want to know if Padre Pio saw the future of our world, we should look at the time he stopped the destruction of his own town during World War II. This story does not come from a religious blog, but from the reports of Allied pilots flying bombers for the United States and British Air Forces. The mission was simple: destroy the German munition dumps located near San Giovanni Rotondo. The pilots had the coordinates locked in. The weather was clear, but every time the squadrons approached the mountain, something inexplicable happened. Pilots reported seeing a monk standing in the air. He was not a ghost or a transparent spirit. He was immense and solid, and he was floating right in front of their cockpits with his hands raised. Their instruments failed. Their bombs released prematurely, dropping harmlessly into the woods or open fields. Some pilots claimed their planes turned around on their own against the controls. When the war ended, many of these pilots traveled to the monastery to see who had stopped them. They walked into the sacristy and saw Padre Pio. He looked at the American commanding officer and said in his thick Italian dialect, "So you are the one who wanted to kill us all." The officer collapsed. He recognized the man from the clouds. This establishes a critical fact for our investigation. Padre Pio did not just sit in a cell and pray. He could project himself physically into the world to stop catastrophes before they happened. This phenomenon is known as bilocation. It is the ability to be in two places at once, and he used this power to intervene in the darkest moments of human history. Consider the case of the Italian general Luigi Cadorna. After a devastating defeat during World War I, the general was in a state of total despair. He was sitting in his tent ready to take his own life. He had his service revolver in his hand. Suddenly, a monk walked into the tent. The monk did not salute. He simply looked at the general and whispered that he would be a fool to end his life. The general was shocked. He dropped the gun and ordered his guards to arrest the intruder. But when the guards rushed in, the tent was empty. There was no way in and no way out. The general survived the war. Years later, he visited San Giovanni Rotondo anonymously. He had never met Padre Pio before. But as he walked into the church, the friar pointed him out and said, "You had a close call that night, my general." These stories are not just legends. They are the foundation of why the 2025 rumors have so much traction. If he could step into a tent to save a general and step into the sky to save a village, then perhaps he really did leave a warning to save the entire world. But this brings us back to the darker side of his visions. The verified accounts show that Padre Pio was deeply tormented by what he saw coming for Europe and the West. He once held a conversation with a German journalist regarding the future of the continent. While he did not give a specific date like 2025 in this interview, his description of the future was apocalyptic. He spoke of a meteor that would fall. He spoke of a war that would be far worse than the Second World War. He said that Germany would be punished, but that other nations would suffer even more because they had known the truth and rejected it. He called it the suicide of Europe. He believed that a time would come when the West would tear itself apart, not just through bombs, but through a total collapse of morality and order. This aligns uncomfortably well with the current state of the world. We see the fracturing of alliances and the rise of global tension. It feels like the suicide he predicted is happening in slow motion right in front of our eyes. But the most chilling connection to the 3 days of darkness comes from his relationship with another mystical event. In the 1960s, a group of young girls in Garabandal, Spain, claimed to see the Virgin Mary. They delivered a message about a worldwide warning and a great miracle followed by a chastisement of fire if the world did not change. The church was very skeptical. They tried to shut it down, but Padre Pio was not skeptical. He sent a letter to the girls encouraging them. He famously said that he believed the Virgin was appearing there. Why is this important? Because the Garabandal prophecies explicitly talk about an event that will stop time. A moment where every human being on earth will see the condition of their own soul. They said this would happen when the world is at its worst, when communism returns, when the church is in confusion, when the very idea of God is forgotten. Padre Pio knew this, and before he died in 1968, he reportedly told one of the brothers that the world was walking on a razor edge. He said that the devil had been granted an extended period of power. This brings us to the mysterious time frame of 100 years. There is a vision attributed to Pope Leo XIII, where he heard Satan ask God for 100 years to destroy the church. Many theologians and mystics believe that this 100-year clock began in the 20th century. If that is true, we are in the final minutes of that final hour. The rumors about 2025 are likely born from this convergence. It is the feeling that the time is up, that the protection is lifting. But Padre Pio did not leave us without a weapon. He often referred to his rosary as his weapon. He clutched it so tightly that the beads would leave marks on his palms. He told his spiritual children that the rosary was the only thing that could hold back the hand of judgment. It sounds too simple to modern ears. We want a bunker. We want a survival plan. We want dates and maps. He offered beads. However, there is one more prophecy. A vision that is rarely discussed because it is so controversial. It involves the Vatican itself. It is said that shortly before his death, he had a vision of the Pope fleeing Rome over the bodies of his priests. This ties into the third secret of Fatima, a secret that Padre Pio was rumored to have known. If 2025 is truly the year of the Great Separation, as the internet claims, then we need to look at what is happening in Rome right now. Because if Pio was right, the darkness does not start in the sky. It starts in the sanctuary. We have arrived at the center of the storm. We have established that Padre Pio was a man of power and a man of God. But now we must confront the document that has set the internet on fire regarding the year 2025. It comes from a book titled The Prophets of Our Times by Renzo Bashara. In this collection, there is a translation of a letter allegedly written by Padre Pio in 1959. It was addressed to his superior, but it reads more like a screenplay for a horror movie than a religious text. If this letter is authentic, then the timeline we are living in right now is about to expire. The text does not mince words. It describes a global catastrophe that begins on a cold winter night. The letter claims that the wind will howl like never before. It warns the faithful to close their windows and not to look out. It says that the earth will tremble so violently that people will not be able to stand. But the physical destruction is only the beginning. The text speaks of clouds of fire and a rain of burning meteors. It says that in the span of a single night, more men will die than in the 2 world wars combined. This is the source of the panic. This is why you see videos with millions of views warning of the 3 days of darkness. The imagery is specific. It speaks of demons moving through the air and imitating the voices of friends and family to trick you into opening the door. It says that the only light that will function is the light of blessed candles. No electric light, no phone screens, no flashlights. Just the ancient flame of faith against a suffocating supernatural darkness. The letter warns that the year 2025 could be the threshold because of the alignment of sin. It says that man has become drunk with his own power and has forgotten that he is a creature. But here we must pause the horror story and do the work of an investigator. Is this letter real? The Vatican does not recognize it. The Capuchin order does not publish it. Many scholars believe that Renzo Bashara may have dramatized or combined various prophecies into one text. However, this does not mean we can relax. Because if we put aside the sensational letter, we find a verified connection that is arguably even more terrifying because it is absolutely real. We are talking about the third secret of Fatima. In 1917, the Virgin Mary appeared to 3 children in Fatima, Portugal. She gave them 3 secrets. The first 2 were revealed early on. They predicted the end of World War I and the start of World War II and the rise of Soviet Russia. But the third secret was kept hidden. It was locked in a safe in the Vatican. Popes read it and trembled, and then refused to release it. They said the world was not ready. Padre Pio knew this secret. There are accounts suggesting that Pio was aware of the contents of the third secret long before the Vatican released their version in the year 2000. And what he said about it aligns perfectly with the atmosphere of 2025. He did not speak of meteors. He spoke of apostasy. Apostasy is a fancy theological word for a simple, terrifying concept. It means a complete abandonment of the faith from within. It means the enemy is not outside the gates, but inside the temple. Fr. Gabriel Amorth was the chief exorcist of the Vatican and a man who knew Padre Pio personally. He stated in an interview that Padre Pio was tormented by the third secret. Amorth said that one day Padre Pio told him very sorrowfully that the great apostasy in the church will begin at the top. Let that sink in. He did not say the danger was a nuclear bomb or a plague or a comet. He said the danger was a corruption of the faith so deep that the church itself would become unrecognizable. He told Amorth that Satan has been introduced into the bosom of the church, and he will within a very short time come to rule a false church. This is why 2025 feels so significant to those who study prophecy. We are watching a world where traditional values are being inverted. We are seeing confusion in Rome. We are seeing a global push for a new type of humanity that relies on technology rather than spirit. To Padre Pio, this spiritual darkness was far scarier than any physical darkness. If the sun goes out, you die and go to heaven. But if the light of truth goes out, you lose your soul forever. There is a famous story that illustrates his view on this future darkness. A woman asked him once about the future of the world. She was terrified of atomic bombs. Padre Pio looked at her and asked her why she was worried about bombs. He said that the bombs destroy the body, but sin destroys the soul. He was trying to shift her focus. But he also gave a timeline for the unfolding of these events. He often spoke of the generation that would follow him. He died in 1968. We are now 2 generations removed. We are the generation that has grown up in the silence of God. The Renzo Bashara letter might be an exaggeration or a fabrication. But the warning about the loss of faith is documented history. And there is one physical prophecy that we cannot ignore because it actually happened. It involves the blood of Saint Januarius in Naples. It is an ancient miracle. A vial of dried blood that liquefies 3 times a year. When it fails to liquefy, disaster usually follows for Italy and the world. It failed to liquefy in 1939, right before World War II. It failed to liquefy in 1980, right before a massive earthquake killed thousands. In December of 2020, at the height of the global pandemic, it failed to liquefy again. Padre Pio had a deep devotion to this miracle. He saw it as a signal from heaven. The fact that the signs are failing and the blood is remaining dry is viewed by mystics as a final countdown. So we have two narratives running parallel. One is the Hollywood disaster movie of fire and demons. The other is the quiet, tragic collapse of the human spirit. Padre Pio seemed to fight both battles. He fought the demons in his cell, so we would not have to fight them in our homes. But he also left us a strategy for when the lights go out. He did not tell us to build bunkers. He did not tell us to buy gold. He told us to build a spiritual shelter. In the final part of our investigation, we are going to look at the practical instructions he gave for this specific time. If 2025 is the year the storm makes landfall, what exactly are we supposed to do? Because according to Padre Pio, there is a place of safety. But you cannot find it on a map. We have spoken about the prophecies and the letters and the geopolitical warnings. But to truly grasp the severity of what is coming, we must descend into the raw, supernatural violence that marked Padre Pio's life. Most people think of saints as peaceful figures bathed in light. But Padre Pio was a soldier in a trench, and the enemy he fought is the same enemy that is currently dismantling the moral structure of our world. He did not just sense evil. He saw it, he touched it, and it touched him back. If you want to know if the 3 days of darkness is real, you have to listen to the sounds that came from his room at night. The other friars were terrified. They would hear the sound of iron bars crashing against the walls. They would hear the sound of a large animal breathing heavily. One night, the superior of the monastery heard a terrible crash. He ran to Pio's cell and found the friar on the floor. He was bleeding. His eyes were swollen shut. The iron bed frame had been twisted as if a giant hand had crushed it. Pio looked up at his superior and simply said that Bluebeard had visited him. He was making a joke out of a horror movie. He called the devil Bluebeard, or the ogre, to take away his power. But the attacks were specific. The devil would appear to him in deceptive forms, sometimes as a naked young woman performing obscene dances to tempt his purity, sometimes as a crucifix that would suddenly shatter and curse him, sometimes even as his own spiritual director giving him false orders. Why is this relevant to 2025? Because the tactics the devil used on Padre Pio in that cell are the exact same tactics being used on the world stage today. Think about it. The devil used disguise. He appeared as something holy or something attractive before revealing his true nature. Look at the modern world. We are being sold destruction disguised as progress. We are told that abandoning tradition is freedom. We are told that the breakdown of the family is liberation. Padre Pio saw through the disguise in his cell, and he is warning us to see through the disguise in our society. He told us that the devil is not a metaphor. He is an active intelligence, and he has a plan. This leads us to the second supernatural power that validates his predictions: the reading of souls. If Padre Pio could look at a stranger and tell them their entire history, then he clearly had access to a database that exists outside of time. There is a famous story of a man who came to confession in the 1950s. He was a skeptic. He did not really believe in the friar's powers. He knelt down and started to rattle off a few minor sins. Padre Pio stopped him. He looked through the wooden screen and said nothing. Then he said, "What about the room in Bologna?" The man froze. Padre Pio continued. He described a specific hotel room in a city the man had visited years ago. He described the time of day. He described the woman who was in the room with him, a woman who was not his wife. The man began to shake. He had never told a soul about that night. It was his deepest secret. Padre Pio, then said, "You have carried this stone around your neck for 10 years. Drop it." The man wept. He was converted on the spot. There are thousands of stories like this. He told women they were pregnant before they knew. He told young men they would become priests when they were planning to become lawyers. He told people the exact date of their death. This creates a terrifying logical conclusion. If he could see the secret sin in a hotel room in Bologna 30 years in the past, why should we doubt that he can see the collective sin of humanity in the year 2025? He described the soul of the modern world as blackened. He said that we were running toward a cliff and celebrating the view. But his battles were not just physical. They were theological. And this brings us back to the great apostasy we mentioned earlier. Padre Pio was investigated by the Holy Office, which is now the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The Vatican bugged his confessional. They opened his mail. They treated him like a criminal for years. Why? Because he was a threat to the comfortable bureaucracy of the Church. He represented raw, untamed mysticism. He once said that the world could exist without the sun, but it could not exist without the Mass. This is a cryptic prophecy in itself. If the 3 days of darkness is literal, then the sun literally disappears. But if it is spiritual, it means the Mass disappears. In 2025, we are seeing a decline in religious practice that is unprecedented in human history. Churches in Europe are being turned into skate parks and nightclubs. In the Americas, the fastest growing religion is none. Padre Pio foresaw a world where the holy sacrifice of the Mass would be treated with indifference or even contempt. He said that when this happens, the restraining force on the devil is removed. This is the key to the entire mystery: the restrainer. Saint Paul speaks of something that restrains the Antichrist. Padre Pio believed that the suffering of the saints and the celebration of the Mass were the only things holding back total chaos. He believed that his own suffering was part of a cosmic dam, holding back a flood of judgment. But here is the scary question. What happens when the saints are gone? Padre Pio died in 1968. Sister Lucia of Fatima died in 2005. The great generation of mystics has passed on. Are we now living in the time where the dam breaks? There is a chilling account from a spiritual daughter of Padre Pio named Cleonis Morcaldi. She asked him explicitly about the future generations. He replied with great sadness that they will be like orphans. He said they will not have the shepherd to guide them, and they will be eaten by wolves. He was talking about us. We are the orphans, and the wolves are circling. You can feel it in the news cycle. The anxiety, the mental health crisis, the sense that reality itself is fracturing. But Padre Pio did not leave us defenseless. In the next chapter of our investigation, we are going to look at the safety protocols he established. Because while the internet screams about buying generators and canned food, Padre Pio had a very different survival kit. He believed that there were specific physical locations and specific spiritual practices that would act as a shield when the darkness falls. We need to explore the connection between Padre Pio and the other great Marian apparitions of the 20th century. Because he was not working alone. He was part of a network of heaven. And when you overlay his warnings with the warnings of Akita in Japan and Kaibo in Africa, a map begins to emerge. A map of what is going to happen in 2025. And more importantly, a map of how to survive it. It would be a mistake to think that Padre Pio was acting alone. He was not a solitary voice shouting in the desert. He was part of a choir, a global network of mystical signals that were all broadcasting the exact same frequency at the exact same time. To understand the full weight of the 2025 forecast, We have to connect the dots between San Giovanni Rotondo and the other remote corners of the world, where the veil between heaven and earth was torn open. In the 1960s, while Padre Pio was nearing the end of his life, a strange event began to unfold in the mountains of northern Spain in a tiny village called Garabandal. 4 young girls claimed to be seeing the Virgin Mary. The messages they received were urgent. They spoke of a coming chastisement. They spoke of a moment in time called the warning. The warning is described as a global event where the entire world will stop. The engines will stop. The planes will hang in the air. Every human being on earth will suddenly see the condition of their own soul, exactly as God sees it. It will be a spiritual autopsy. For a few minutes, we will feel the pain of every sin we have ever committed. We will see the consequences of our indifference. The Catholic Church was very cautious about Garabandal. They are naturally skeptical of children claiming to see visions. But there was one man who did not hesitate. Padre Pio believed in Garabandal. There is a documented event where one of the visionaries named Conchita received a letter from Padre Pio. In the letter, he encouraged her and validated her visions. He told her that he believed the Blessed Mother was appearing to them. This is a massive endorsement. The man with the stigmata. The man who could read souls. The man who could bilocate. He put his stamp of approval on a prophecy that says the world is going to face a supernatural reset. The Garabandal prophecies state that this warning will happen when the world is at its worst, when the situation seems hopeless, when the church is undergoing a terrible trial. Does that sound familiar? It sounds exactly like the headlines of 2025. But the network extends even further. We must travel from Italy and Spain all the way to Japan, to a place called Akita. In 1973, 5 years after Padre Pio died, a deaf nun named Sister Agnes Sasagawa began to witness impossible things. A wooden statue of the Virgin Mary began to weep human tears. It did not happen once. It happened 101 times. The tears were analyzed by the University of Akita and found to be real human fluid. But the message that accompanied the tears is what should keep you awake at night. It is perhaps the most violent prophecy in modern history. The message warned that if men do not repent, the Father will inflict a terrible punishment on all humanity. It will be a punishment greater than the deluge, such as one will never have seen before. The message continues saying that fire will fall from the sky and will wipe out a great part of humanity, the good as well as the bad, sparing neither priests nor faithful. The survivors will find themselves so desolate that they will envy the dead. This is the Akita prophecy, and here is the terrifying connection. Cardinal Ratzinger, who later became Pope Benedict XVI, stated that the message of Akita is essentially the same as the message of Fatima. And we know that Padre Pio knew the secret of Fatima. Do you see the picture forming? It is a triangle of warning. Fatima in Portugal, Garabandal in Spain, Akita in Japan, and sitting in the center acting as the spiritual anchor was Padre Pio in Italy. They are all describing the same event. Pio called it the 3 days of darkness. Akita called it fire from the sky. Garabandal called it the chastisement. They are different names for the same catastrophe. A moment where the patience of heaven runs out and the physical laws of the universe are suspended to wake humanity up. The timelines also converge on our current era. The mystics often spoke of a period of peace that would be granted to the world if humanity listened. But they also spoke of what would happen if humanity refused to listen. We have had nearly 80 years of relative peace in the West since the end of World War II. We have built technology that allows us to play God. We have rewritten the laws of biology and morality. Padre Pio warned, that this pride would be our downfall. He famously said that the world is walking on the edge of a cliff, and we are dancing while we do it. He believed that the devil was granted a specific century of power, a time of testing. Many theologians believe this century began around the time of the Russian Revolution in 1917, or perhaps later. If we do the math, we are in the danger zone. We are in the final minutes of the final hour. But there is another layer to this global network. It is not just about destruction. It is about the katechon, the force that restrains. Padre Pio told his spiritual children that he was offering his suffering to hold back the arm of justice. He was a living shield. When he died in 1968, people asked who would take his place. Who would be the lightning rod for the world? Some say it was Pope John Paul II who was shot and survived. Some say it was the hidden prayers of nuns in cloistered convents. But as we approach 2025, there is a growing sense that the restrainer is being lifted. The walls are coming down. Look at the natural world. The increase in earthquakes, the floods, the strange weather patterns. The scientific community calls it climate change. The mystic community calls it the groan of creation. Padre Pio often spoke about nature rebelling against man. He said that because man has rebelled against his creator, the creation will rebel against man. The earth itself is reacting to the spiritual state of humanity. When we are chaotic, the weather is chaotic. When we are violent, the earth is violent. This is why the 2025 predictions include elements of natural disaster. The 3 days of darkness might not be just a supernatural event. It could be a massive volcanic eruption. It could be a nuclear winter. It could be an asteroid impact. God often uses nature to fulfill prophecy. The parting of the Red Sea was a miracle, but it was also a strong east wind. So when Padre Pio saw the future, he might have been seeing the inevitable result of our abuse of the natural and moral order. But the most haunting part of his connection to this global network is his silence. Toward the end of his life, he spoke less and less. He would fall into long ecstasies during Mass, where he would just stare at the host in silence. When people asked him what he saw, he would just weep. Some believe he saw the great apostasy. He saw the empty churches of 2025. He saw a generation of young people addicted to screens and pills and totally cut off from the divine. He saw us, and perhaps that is why he wept. Not because of the fire, but because of the cold. The coldness of the human heart that no longer knows how to love. But we cannot end the investigation here. Because if the storm is coming, we need to know where the lifeboats are. Padre Pio did not just predict the rain. He built an ark. In the next part of our series, we are going to open the blueprints of that ark. We are going to look at the 5-point plan that Padre Pio gave to his spiritual children for times of extreme crisis. It involves specific prayers. It involves specific habits. And it involves a promise that he made to anyone who follows him. He said, "I will stand at the gates of paradise, and I will not enter until the last of my spiritual children has entered." That is the promise we need to hold on to as we look at the year 2025. But to claim that promise, there are conditions, and we need to know exactly what they are. We have spent a great deal of time staring into the dark abyss of the prophecies. We have looked at the falling stars and the empty churches and the wars that threaten to consume the globe. But if we stop there, we are missing the most important part of Padre Pio's mission. He was not just a prophet of doom. He was a general preparing an army. He knew that a time would come when the world would go mad. He knew that his spiritual children would need a shelter that was stronger than concrete. So he built one. It is not a bunker buried in the side of a mountain. It is a spiritual fortress constructed out of 5 specific habits. This is the survival kit for 2025. This is the only way to navigate the 3 days of darkness, whether they are literal or spiritual. The first pillar of this fortress is confession. To the modern mind, confession feels outdated. It feels like therapy without the diploma. But for Padre Pio, it was a bath of fire. He spent up to 16 hours a day inside that wooden box. Why? Because he knew something that we have forgotten. He knew that sin is a doorway. Every time we commit a serious sin, we open a door in our soul, and we invite the darkness in. If the prophecies are true and demons are going to be unleashed upon the earth, then the most dangerous thing you can have is an open door. Confession slams that door shut. It seals the cracks in your armor. He often chased people out of the confessional if they were not sincere. He would yell at them. He called them beasts. It sounds cruel, but it was the cruelty of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. He was trying to save their lives before the cancer killed them. The second pillar is the weapon. We have mentioned it before, but we must understand how he used it. The rosary. He did not view the rosary as a cute meditation. He viewed it as a chain that binds the enemy. He prayed it constantly. He said that the rosary is the weapon for these times. Notice he said these times. He foresaw an era where intellectual arguments would fail. You cannot argue with the devil. You cannot reason with a world that has lost its mind. You can only fight it with prayer. The third pillar is the Eucharist. He called the Mass the heart of the world. He believed that receiving the Eucharist was the only way to keep your sanity in a world of confusion. It is the fuel. If 2025 brings a collapse of food supply or a collapse of the economy, the one hunger that must be satisfied is the hunger of the soul. But Padre Pio was not just a mystic with his head in the clouds. He was incredibly practical. He knew that suffering was real and that bodies break. This leads us to the most visible proof of his prophecy. The Casa Sollievo della Sofferenza, the home for the relief of suffering. In the middle of a poor, rocky Italian mountain town, he decided to build one of the most advanced hospitals in Europe. People thought he was crazy. They had no money. The war had just ended, but he insisted. He raised the funds penny by penny. He oversaw the construction himself. He built a citadel of science and faith. Why? Because he knew what was coming. He foresaw a future where suffering would increase exponentially. He described the hospital as a place where the prayer of the patients would storm the gates of heaven. He was building a prototype for the future, a place where science and faith work together. In 2025, as we face bioethical nightmares and new pandemics, the vision of his hospital becomes a lighthouse. It stands as a reminder that we are not supposed to just sit and wait for the end of the world. We are supposed to build. We are supposed to heal. We are supposed to act. This brings us to the concept of the spiritual child. This is perhaps the most exclusive and powerful insurance policy you can have. Padre Pio made a deal with God. He said, "Lord, I will stand at the gates of paradise, and I will not enter until the last of my spiritual children has entered." Think about that. He is willing to wait outside of heaven until everyone he has adopted is safe inside. But how do you become a spiritual child? It is not a membership you buy. It is a covenant. You have to live a Christian life. You have to follow his example of charity and prayer. You have to accept your own suffering. He taught that suffering is not a punishment. It is a currency. He believed that when we suffer and offer it up to God, we are actually buying graces for the world. We are helping to hold back the chastisement. So when you see the news about wars and rumors of wars in 2025, do not look for a bunker. Look at your own life. Are you a spiritual child? Have you signed the contract? Because the darkness that is coming is going to hunt for fear. The only thing that drives out fear is love, and the only thing that drives out darkness is light. Padre Pio was a lamp. He burned himself out to light the way for us. But a lamp is useless if you do not have oil. The 5 habits: confession, communion, rosary, scripture, charity. These are the oil. If you have them, it does not matter if the sun goes out for 3 days. You will have a light inside you that cannot be extinguished. But there is one final piece to this puzzle. A piece that involves his own death and his final words. Because even as he lay dying, he was seeing things that he could not fully describe. He saw the glory of what comes after the darkness. And this is the part that the doom and gloom YouTube channels usually leave out. They focus on the 3 days of darkness. They forget about the 4th day, the day the sun rises again. The era of peace. Padre Pio saw that too. And in our final chapter, we are going to look at the light at the end of the tunnel. We are going to see what he predicted for the restoration of the world, because the story does not end in disaster. It ends in triumph. The prophets of doom always stop at midnight. They leave you standing in the dark with the demons and the fire and the fear. But Padre Pio was not a man of the night. He was a man of the dawn. If you study his life and his connection to the great mystical networks of the world, you will find that the 3 days of darkness are not the end of the story. They are a transition. They are the birth pains of a new world. Padre Pio foresaw a time after the storm. He spoke of a restoration of the church that would be so glorious, it would outshine even the early days of Christianity. He believed that the chastisement, whether it comes in 2025 or later, is necessary to break the fever of humanity. We are sick. We are addicted to sin and materialism and pride. The storm is the medicine. But when the fever breaks, the patient recovers. This aligns perfectly with the promise given at Fatima. The Virgin Mary did not say that in the end the world will burn. She said, in the end, my immaculate heart will triumph. Triumph. That is a word of victory. That is a word of hope. So what does the 4th day look like? What does the world look like when the sun rises after the darkness? According to the mystics Padre Pio supported, it will be a time of incredible peace. The noise of the modern world will be gone. The frantic race for money and power will be gone. People will look at each other and see brothers and sisters, not competitors. The church will be poor, but it will be holy. It will no longer be a political institution, but a spiritual family. This is the vision that sustained Padre Pio through 50 years of bleeding. He knew that his suffering was purchasing this future. He was paying the down payment on the era of peace. So where does that leave us right now, as we stare down the barrel of 2025? It leaves us with a choice. We can choose to be victims of the prophecy, or we can choose to be warriors of the prophecy. The victim buys a bunker and hoards food and lives in terror of every headline. The victim lets the devil win before the battle even starts, because the devil loves fear. Fear paralyzes the soul. The warrior does exactly what Padre Pio told us to do. The warrior prays, the warrior hopes, and the warrior does not worry. That was his famous motto. Pray, hope, and don't worry. It sounds like a cliché you would see on a bumper sticker. But when it comes from a man who fought demons with his bare hands, it is a military command. Pray because it connects you to the power grid of heaven. Hope because you know the end of the story. And don't worry because worry is useless. If the world ends tomorrow, worrying will not stop it. If the world continues for another 1,000 years, worrying will not help you enjoy it. Padre Pio wants us to live in the present moment. He wants us to do the good that is right in front of us, to feed the hungry neighbor, to forgive the enemy, to love the family member who is difficult. These small acts of love are the true shelter. They build a light around you that the darkness cannot penetrate. There is a beautiful prayer that Padre Pio recited every single day after communion. It is called the Stay With Me prayer. It is the perfect anthem for 2025. He would say, "Stay with me, Lord, for it is necessary to have you present, so that I do not forget you. Stay with me, Lord, because I am weak and I need your strength." And then he would say, "Stay with me, Lord, for the night is coming, and with it darkness and tribulations and fears." He acknowledged the night. He did not pretend it wasn't coming, but he did not ask for the night to be taken away. He asked for God to stay with him in the night. That is the secret. We do not need to escape 2025. We just need to make sure we are not walking through it alone. As we conclude this investigation, we are left with the image of an old monk. His hands are wounded. His back is bent. He is standing at the threshold of eternity. He made a promise that he would not enter heaven until all of his children were safe. He is waiting there right now. He is watching the timeline of history unfold. He is watching the wars and the rumors of wars. And he is watching you. He is extending an invitation, not to a club of fear, but to a legion of courage. He is asking you to pick up the weapon of the rosary. He is asking you to clean your soul in confession. He is asking you to be a light in a world that is falling in love with the dark. The year 2025 is just a number on a calendar. It might bring the storm, or it might bring another year of waiting. But it does not matter. Because if you are standing with Padre Pio, you are standing on a rock, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. The warning has been given. The preparations have been made. The rest is up to us. Pray, hope, and don't worry.